As I said earlier, many of the D7000's most important functions can only be changed by accessing the menu system, and that is done by pressing the menu button. The menus have been divided up into 6 major sections or tabs running down the left-hand column. You have Playback, Shooting, Custom Setting, Setup, Retouch, and My Menu. The playback menus control how you view images on the monitor, transfer images to a computer, or print directly to a printer. The shooting menus control the settings that determine the look, style, size, and quality of the pictures you take. The custom setting menus are used to change how the camera functions while you're shooting. There are almost 50 different submenus, and Nikon has divided them up into 6 groups. Group A has 8 submenus for customizing the autofocus system. Group B has 5 submenus for changing metering and exposure controls. Group C has 5 submenus for things like self-timer, the LCD monitor, and the auto exposure autofocus lock button. Group D has 14 submenus for controlling various displays in the viewfinder, file numbering preferences, burst speeds, mirror lockup, and others. Group E has 6 submenus for customizing bracketing and flash. And Group F has 10 submenus for modifying the functions of the various external buttons and switches on the body of the camera. The setup menus are used to control things like the date and time, cleaning the image sensor, and formatting memory cards. The retouch menus allow you to make a variety of in-camera adjustments and enhancements to images after they have been shot. If you don't want to use a computer to edit your images, then the retouch menus are the next best thing. And you don't have to worry about permanently altering the original photo, because the camera automatically saves the retouch version as a totally new file. So you can always go back to the original if you decide you don't like the changes that you've made. Any pictures on the memory card that are retouched copies of an original image will have this icon superimposed to remind you. And the final tab is called My Menu. This one is quite a bit different than the other 5 menu tabs, because the only menus shown here will be the ones that you decide to add to it. My Menu lets you choose up to 20 of your favorite menus from throughout the rest of the menu system and create your own customized menu page with all of them grouped together in one easy-to-find place. As you can see here, I've already added movie settings and viewfinder grid display to my menu. I like this feature because even though the D7000 has dozens and dozens of menus, you'll probably actually only use a handful of them on a regular basis. So why not put the ones that you use most often all in one place? It's kind of like creating shortcuts on your computer's desktop for the programs that you use every day. Here's how it works. First, we choose the Add Items command. Then we can select one of the other 5 menu groups that we looked at before. And then go down and highlight Interval Timer Shooting. To create a shortcut for this menu and add it to our customized menu page, we just press the OK button, and there it is, listed with the other 2 menus I already added earlier. Now we can either leave it at the top of the order, or we can sandwich it in between the other 2 menus by moving the yellow cursor line. Or we can put it at the bottom of the list and then press the OK button to lock it in. So there we have it. Now the My Menu tab has 3 menus on it and room for another 17 if we want to add more. Later, if you change your mind, you can always use the Remove Items command to delete a menu from the page. Or you can choose Rank Items to change the order that they appear on the page. The final option, Choose Tab, will actually replace the My Menu page with something else called Recent Settings. Let's select it and see what happens. Notice that now the My Menu tab has been substituted with a new tab called Recent Settings. So what's the difference between My Menu and Recent Settings? Well, My Menu allows you to pick and choose the menus that you want to see displayed and specify the order they appear. But as the name implies, Recent Settings will automatically create a list of your most recently used menus sorted in the order that you use them. In other words, whenever you make a change to any menu setting, a shortcut will automatically be added to the top of the Recent Settings list. Right now it's blank because I just turned it on. But normally, after we've used the camera for a while, it might look something like this. So it's up to you to decide whether you prefer to use Recent Settings or My Menu. But I think it's really too bad they both can't be turned on at the same time. A nice feature of the D7000 is the handy in-camera help system that covers nearly every menu. Whenever you see this icon on screen, you can hold down the Help button to show a brief description of the currently highlighted menu selection. The explanations are actually quite helpful, and they make a good quick reference tool as you get to know the camera better. Now, because the D7000 has well over 100 different menus, and each of them have at least 2 and sometimes several settings to choose from, there isn't time right now, nor is it necessary to explore all the menus one by one. Many of them should be self-explanatory, and we'll be discussing the most important menus during upcoming chapters. However, there are a few noteworthy custom settings and special features of the D7000 that I'd like to point out before we move on. So let's start with the shooting menus. First, the file naming menu allows you to customize the 3-digit prefix that's used when the camera names the pictures you take. The default prefix is DSC, but I've changed mine to MLG to remind me these photos are being taken for the Magic Lantern Guide that you're watching right now. Next, the Role Played by Card and Slot 2 menu allows you to designate how the camera uses whatever card you may have inserted into the second memory card slot. There are 3 choices. You can choose to have card number 2 take over whenever card number 1 is filled up. You can choose to use card number 2 as an identical backup for card number 1. In other words, a carbon copy of every photo you shoot will be recorded onto both cards. Or you can choose to have raw image files record to card number 1 and JPEG images record to card number 2. I really like this option, and it's the one I have selected on my own camera whenever I'm shooting RAW plus JPEG. Next, let's scroll way down through the shooting menus and stop on multiple exposure. This can be a fun feature of the camera to experiment with. With this menu, you can set up the camera to combine a series of 2 to 10 exposures into a single image. And since the camera does it internally by merging the raw data that was captured by the image sensor, the results are usually superior to anything you could do later on the computer. Having the auto gain option turned on will help avoid getting a final image that looks overexposed. Another cool feature I like is interval timer shooting. This function makes it really easy to record a time-lapse sequence without any extra hardware attached to the camera. Here's an example. I set the camera to record one photo every 5 seconds for 30 minutes. And then I use my computer to put them all together as a time-lapse movie. To shoot a time-lapse, start by making sure the camera is framed up perfectly on the shot you want and locked down on a nice sturdy tripod that won't move. I always shoot a test shot to make sure everything looks good. And if it does, I take note of the shutter speed and the aperture that the camera used, and then I switch to manual exposure mode and dial in those exact settings manually. Why? so the camera doesn't change the exposure settings during the time lapse. Even a slight shutter speed change or an aperture change in the middle of the time lapse might ruin the effect. So, manual is the only safe exposure mode. Now go back to the interval timer shooting menu. Your first decision is whether you want to begin shooting the time lapse immediately after you finish setting it up, or do you want to program the camera to begin at a certain time of day. Normally, you'll choose now by pressing the right arrow button. How much time do you want to elapse between each photo the camera takes? That's called the interval. The longest interval is 1 frame per 24 hours, and the shortest is 1 frame per second. I'll choose 1 second for this example. Now you have to decide how many photos you want the camera to take during the time lapse. 999 is the maximum. Some things to consider when setting up a time lapse are: how much time do you want to wait around for the time lapse to finish? How long will your battery last? You don't want it to die in the middle of your time lapse. And is your memory card going to fill up before all the pictures have been recorded? I'm going to choose 10 frames for this example so it finishes quickly, but in a real situation, 10 frames probably wouldn't be enough to create a very interesting time lapse. And finally, you have to tell the camera how many shots to record during each interval. Normally, you'll leave this set on 1. And this number tells you how many photos are going to be taken over the course of the time lapse. Now I select On, and I step away from the camera and let it do its thing. Now, if for any reason you want to cancel the time lapse in midstream, you'll have to turn the camera off. When the camera is finished taking the time lapse, it will revert back to the normal shooting mode. Each frame of the time lapse is just a normal standalone full-frame photograph, just like any other picture that the camera takes. Now you can transfer them to your computer and use whatever software program you want, such as QuickTime, to string them all together as a movie, like this one that I shot earlier. Next, let's exit the Shooting Menu tab, go down to the Custom Setting Menu tab, choose D, Shooting Display, and then select the ISO Display and Adjustment menu. Earlier, I pointed out that the ISO speed is not normally shown in the viewfinder or on the LCD control panel. I don't know about you, but I don't like that. I want to see the ISO displayed all the time. So if I change this setting to show ISO sensitivity, then I can see the ISO here and here. But notice that now the only way I can see the remaining capacity of my memory card is by looking at the shooting information display. And that's fine with me, because keeping tabs on the ISO is more important. Now let's leave the Custom Setting Menu tab and move down to the Setup Menu tab. The first sub-menu in this area is called Format Memory Card. Whenever you insert a brand new card or a previously used card that you want to completely erase, it must be formatted. Please note that formatting a memory card will effectively erase all data on the card, including any photos that have been protected. Formatting a card is very easy to do and takes just a few seconds. Here's how. Select the Format menu, choose whichever one of the two cards that you want to reformat, highlight Yes, and then press OK again. That's it. When the formatting is done, the LCD will return to the Setup menu and you're ready to start shooting. If I press the Info button, you can see the total capacity of the card. In other words, with the camera's current image quality settings, 410 images is the maximum number of photos I'll be able to shoot with this 4 GB memory card. However, if you have a higher capacity card, the display may look a little different. Anytime the capacity exceeds 1,000 pictures, a little K will appear next to the number. For example, the 3.3K shown here means there is still room for at least another 3,300 images on this 32 gigabyte card. Let's press the menu button again and take a look at the next menu, Save User Settings. I think this is one of the most powerful features of the D7000 because it allows you to change dozens of camera settings all at once with one simple turn of the mode dial. I guess the easiest way to explain what this menu does is to give you an example of how you might use it. Suppose there's a group of custom camera settings that you like to use when you're shooting landscapes, and another set of custom settings that you like to use for shooting sports and action. Obviously, those two very different types of shooting situations have unique needs. One way of changing the camera's settings when you go from shooting landscapes to shooting sports, or vice versa, is to change all of the settings one by one. But if you've got, say, a dozen settings to change, that will take a lot of time, and you might not be able to remember to change them all. A better way is to use the U1 and U2 settings on the mode dial. These modes function like memory banks to store dozens of your favorite custom camera settings. For example, you could program your favorite landscape settings into U1 and your usual sports settings into U2. Then to switch from one type of shooting to the other, all you have to do is turn the mode dial to U1 or U2, and all of your settings will be updated. Here's how to set it up. First, set the mode dial to any of the shooting modes, except U1 or U2. Next, take a few minutes and set all of the camera's custom functions exactly how you want them to be memorized. This includes nearly every user configurable setting and menu. Once you've got the camera set up how you want it, now go to the Save User Settings menu, select it, choose either U1 or U2, and then press the OK button to save the settings. And that's it. You're done. The settings for U1 have now been memorized, and anytime in the future you want to return to that exact same camera configuration, all you have to do is rotate the mode dial to U1. Now that U1 has been programmed, we could follow the same steps to also program U2, but let's move on. The next menu allows you to completely erase the U1 or U2 memory banks if you decide you don't need them anymore. Next, the Image Comment menu will allow you to add up to 36 characters of text to the invisible metadata that's automatically stored with each photo you shoot. For example, if you're taking the camera with you on your vacation, you might want to set it up to embed the location of the trip. First, you use this menu to create the text, as I have already done. Then you put a check mark in this box so the camera knows to attach it to all the photos you're about to take. And finally, you select Done to turn it on. So from now on, that text will be embedded in the metadata of every picture you take until you turn it off again. A similar function is called Copyright Information. This menu allows you to embed copyright information into the metadata of each photo as you take them. There's one field for the artist's name and another for the name of the copyright holder. Next, Save Load Settings is another feature I really like. This is designed for photographers who work with multiple D7000 bodies and who want to transfer all their custom settings from one camera to the other camera. First, you use this menu to save your camera's custom settings as a data file on the primary memory card. Then move the card to a second camera, and then use this menu again to load all your saved custom settings into the second camera. The final menu I want to bring to your attention is called Virtual Horizon. When activated, this feature displays a virtual horizon on the LCD monitor to assist you in keeping the camera perfectly level. Well, that's really about all the menus we need to cover for right now. As I said, the important ones will be covered later, and the rest are either self-explanatory or they're advanced settings that go beyond the scope of this guide. I encourage you to go ahead and take your time exploring and experimenting with the menu settings at your own pace. You don't have to worry about wasting money on film, and you can see the results instantly. Isn't digital photography great?